I'm curious, what was life like growing up in Kenya? It seems like it has, taught you to be a little bit more introspective and mature. But, I'm also keen to hear it from your side and talk us through that experience, especially for someone who's probably never been to Kenya.
Yeah. Okay. So let me give you a bit of a walk down memory lane. So look, the way the history happened is that my great grandparents were actually moved to Africa in the 1900s from the Indian subcontinent, and then they ended up. I think my great granddad was. I think he was into some construction work and so forth, and then I think my great grandma was either a nurse or a teacher, and they'd come into basically because there were British colonies. India was, and so was that part of Africa. So they'd came to work, and the idea was then they'd go back again. But my great grandparents and my grandparents were born there. My parents were born there, and I was born there. So I ended up being like a fourth generation in that system. And then when the British gave back independence to Kenya, the idea was people that were from Indian origin could go back. But we left India, I don't know, 70, 80 years ago. We had no links at all. So Kenya became home. And if you look at the East African sort of coastline all the way to South Africa, there's quite a few, I'd say, indigenous people, Indians like myself, but basically, that became home. And we didn't really see, we obviously look Indian and we probably had some Indian cultures. We were too far away from it. So as we grew up, I sort of say my friend circle, I went to a sort of my sort of younger age, where we lived was a community we would live in an environment. There was probably a lot of Indian people around us, Indian looking people. But then when you went to school and all that, you had a lot of mixed kids as well. The Indians in that part of Africa were very well accepted because I speak Swahili, for example. I sort of understand the culture. I feel very African at heart and all that. But though we had this kind of Indian thing in us, so. But we were very well integrated in that sense. So growing up was interesting because I would say that I had a mixed bunch of friends, and we obviously did a lot of things that were, how do you put it? There was a sense of some of the genes did play a role because our parents wanted us to make sure that, they put a lot of emphasis on education, for instance. Where I think it's typical Asian mentality, study hard.
Right, yeah.
But on the flip side, you're living in a country where there's a lot of sports and great athletes and get people running around, etc. But I didn't have the DNA for that, so I would look at that in awe and inspiration. But that was a very different part of the world. But the lifestyle was about, I think, a lot of the Indians in that part of Africa were always saying, well, at some point we'd like to emigrate. And the immigration happened. It didn't happen back to the east, it was the west. So a lot of Indians moved to the UK, moved to Canada, moved to the US. So my family sort of started moving as well. So my granddad moved to the UK, my mother's side of the family moved to Canada and the US. So we had relations around the world. So we were in some ways a little bit different. Though we were living in Kenya, we had these links outside. So my sort of family itself was pretty humble. So my dad ran a bookshop. My mother was not working, and we weren't very well off. And I have a sister as well. And for us, it was all about making sure we could do well, so that we could make it in life. So there was that pressure a lot of times, and it was very clear at a young age for me that if I did not do well, then that was it, and I would be pretty much. And if you're in a country like Kenya, where I would say the standard of living is obviously if the cost of living is low, but if you're in that low bucket, it's very hard to get out of it because this is very much an emerging country where per capita incomes are very low, etc. And I didn't want to be like that. I wanted to be obviously have a bit more, So I knew I needed to do more and to keep up. And there was also this sense of pride that you've got to do well and you've got to keep the family reputation up. So that was always in the back. So, but I wasn't a great student. I was okay. Till I was around 14, I'd say 15, 16, I was average kid. I never got great results. I just kind of got by. I wasn't failing, but I was just getting by. I was pretty sporty. I love sports. So I would play volleyball, football. I do all kinds of stuff. I'd love having fun, and I was known as a naughty kid. That was me.
Okay.
So as many times, if anything went wrong in class, so this guy must have done it. So I was the naughty. My sister, on the other hand, was a good kid. So it's funny. He was always like, "This guy's a naughty guy. That guy's a good guy." Yeah. And we lived not far from school, so I'd walk to school. I'd carry a backpack, come back, I would throw my backpack in the house and play outside. It was a great childhood. And the weather was great, and we used to go for holidays to a place called Mombasa, which is by the beach. So my father would save up money and say, "We're going to go this holiday. We love going for this holiday. We'll drive in his car. Hopefully the car didn't break down on the way. Go a nice 2-week holiday and come back." So we kind of lived within our means. It was never a lavish lifestyle. And then I think what happened is when I got to my A levels, because we followed the British system.
Yep, same here.
Same as you are Singapore, yeah. And I knew that if I didn't do well, I didn't want to end up running my dad's bookshop, because ideally the thing was that that's going to be your life. And I had one of my cousins, who's he's been a great mentor to me as well. He was fairly, I won't say, in some ways he was like a fatherly figure for me. He guided me all through that, and from him I learned that you've got to start getting your results in place, because if you want to leave and do get a degree, the problem with the Kenyan education system is that, and hence I really am a firm believer that we should invest in education, is that if I ended up in a Kenyan university, if I got in, they're very competitive to get in, the university ends up closing. So people doing a 4-year degree would take 8 years. So they shut the university, they run out of funds, or it's not a very good, healthy system. It's a pity, because kids in school, especially the local public schools in Kenya, are really, really competitive. The standards were so high. I was never at that league. And those kids end up at the local Kenyan universities. Unfortunately, they just spend forever trying to get their degree. And I could see this, and I was like, I'm not going to end up there. And so I had to try and fight for a scholarship. And so my last 2 years in school, I ended up pulling my socks up. I think I'd say I switched. I don't know what happened in my mind. I just switched. And I ended up getting better grades. And then I got a scholarship. And that was probably my ticket out in terms of getting the education. And I always knew I'd get a degree and come back to Kenya and start working. And the thing is, I did engineering, and which I didn't want to do, as I mentioned, with psychology. And I'm not good at engineering. I'm so bad at my hands, trust me. So I had my engineering degree, and I was looking for a job. I was like, my God, I'd be working in a factory. It's not like not me at all, But anyway, but that was my kind of life, and I had some great friends. And I'd say, we talked a bit about getting older. So my strongest friends today that I strongest relationships I have is friends I made when I was in Kenya.
Right.
So we live now around the world. One of them lives in Kenya. The other there are about 6 of us. We spread across Asia, the North America, and the Middle East and Europe. And we meet every so often. And we really get down and talk about our lives in Kenya, because we all grew up in very humble families. So that's kind of my core group. And I'd say the other part about living in Kenya was, I think this thing around, it taught me a lot about humility, I'd say, because I used to see poverty. I used to see people that were really smart that never made it because they just didn't get the opportunity. I wouldn't call it, there's a class system that's built up. And, it was there in the society. Because if you look at Kenya, the British legacy, the British left, there were a few colonies that stayed behind. They were normally the wealthier, they had beautiful houses and great businesses. Then you had the Indians who were running factories and restaurants and things like this. And then you had the Africans who were really kind of in all parts of the industry, but they were the dominant sector. So I saw mixed races, mixed classes, and I kind of learned a lot about tolerance, about appreciation, about giving to people, taking from people, and I probably became a lot smarter, street smart. The reason I say this is because there's a lot of corruption in Kenya, there's a lot of crime in Kenya, and there's a lot of things that you get in the emerging markets. So I became a lot street smarter, and I think that kind of played as a great skill as I moved on in life.
Yeah,
this thing you can't learn in a textbook or when you're in school or such. So that's my upbringing in Kenya, and I go back every year, and I love going back. It's still home, and I love my Swahili is kind of not 100% now, but I love speaking Swahili and getting into the thick of things. It's so lovely,
That's awesome. Yeah, you speak about it with such fondness. There are a few things, because ultimately this podcast is about resilience and learning how to be a little bit stronger mentally and physically to go the distance. And I'm curious because even though we can build up all this resilience and be stronger, it sounds to me like there's a lot of, especially when where you grew up, there's a lot of the element of luck involved, be it the class system, the fact that I mean, of course, I understand you had a scholarship to go overseas, but I would imagine the students in the Kenyan universities, who are very bright, but when you have to pursue your degree for twice the normal amount of years, it must damage your morale and that psychology of feeling like you're actually better than you think you are. So I don't know, in your opinion, how big does luck play in all of this?
A very big part, a really big part, and I kind of look back and say, had I not had those opportunities with the scholarships and go outside and all, and probably in some ways, people that could guide me and say, do this and go there and talk to these guys, I wouldn't have been where I was. So I think being at the right time in the right place is critical. And I think people, the bright African kids who are doing really well in school, and they just follow the conventional paths. They will apply to the Nairobi University, which is a very high level and bar to get into. And there's not a lot of places. Typically, there's more people graduating from high school to go to university in a few places. The bar is really high. All A grades and all that kind of stuff. But they follow that path, and they would not get in. Some of them, and then the ones that didn't get in who were very bright would say, "Okay, I'll end up either not going to university and do something different." That's fine. But then that something different is very different. It's not like if you're in like Singapore or other parts of the world, if you don't go to university, it doesn't matter. There's all other great things to do. In a country like India, there isn't many other things to do because you end up having to take jobs that don't pay a lot of money, and it's really a struggle in life, and then you're on this pretty much this trap you can't get out of. So I think and unfortunately they didn't get lucky in the process, and I really feel for them. There's some of them that probably have got their education and they didn't go to the Kenyan system. They went to other universities like myself and others. They've ended up being much more successful in life. And the funny thing is, they're not the smartest. It's very bizarre. So when I look at some people, I'm not saying that they're not smart. They're not the smartest. So some of my friends I was in university with, when I went to England, for example, they're bright kids, but were they the smartest? Probably not. The guys that were smartest hang around waiting to go to the national systems, and they lost out. And I think it's a bit unfair. So luck does play a very big part. I think the other thing about luck is also this whole immigration thing that's taken place. And you see that in a lot of the emerging countries where people realize, God, I don't get a lot of opportunity here. Let me immigrate. And some of them have the luck. They just apply. So I remember when I came back to Kenya after finishing my degree, it was about 93 timeframe. The Australian government had opened up a system where they said, look, if you want to immigrate, you've got to have so many points and you can go to Australia. There's a bunch of my work circuit. They were in the circuit where they talked to people who knew about this opportunity. And they were lucky to be in that circuit. And they applied. And some of my friends also have ended up in Australia, quite successful. Some did the same for Canada. But they had these people around and told, oh, you can go to Canada. And as a result, they got jobs and all that. And so I feel sorry for the people that didn't know about this. And they probably are the smartest guys, but they were slogging away trying to make ends meet. So you're right. Luck, I think, plays a very, very big role in these things. So it's about these things. And I guess, yeah. So when I look back clearly, now the other part of me is some of my friends who didn't leave and didn't go to university, they stayed back. They also got lucky, some of them, because their parents had businesses or they had uncles and aunts who could help and support them. And so they've been able to make it with that luck as well. So thankfully so. But obviously they've missed out on getting the global exposure. But they're quite happy where they are. They've had their luck. Others have not. So you're spot on. I think luck plays a very big role in these things, which is a bit sad in some ways, And
Yes.
and I tell my kids this as well. I'm like, hey guys, you don't know what I or my parents have gone through, etc. And sometimes it's just just have it on the plate, and just don't realize this life can be a struggle too. Huh?
Yeah, it's true. But by that same token, I'm also a firm believer that we can't judge our experience until we've had, decades of perspective. And what I mean by that is, so I went through a period of clinical depression for about 10 years. And, during that time, I mean, for me, I thought it was the worst experience ever. And I thought, oh my gosh, how did my life get to this? But now when I look back, I realize, what I wished I didn't have has really built in me a lot of resilience and a lot of lessons that I wouldn't have otherwise learned. And I think, and I'm not that I'm trying to force a positive spin on luck, but I think, like, regardless of having good luck or bad luck, there's always some value we can gather from the experience, regardless of how we choose to see it. Because in a couple of decades time, when we reflect on where it pointed us in our directions in life, we realize that there's some good things that came out of it. And I suppose that's my way of saying that, regardless of luck, there's always something to be grateful for.
Yeah, I agree. Because, I did read about your story, and I watched a few clips that you put up there. I think it was the SMU side as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I really feel for you. And I think you're right. I mean, I don't know how to. I haven't been through that, so I know the journey you went through must have been so hard. But then I think this question of you needing and going for medical attention and help, it's that, I think, that flicking point where you had that opportunity and you did that. But had you not done that, life could have taken a different turn altogether. Which, it's very true. And how many people in that situation didn't have the luck or the ability to get that opportunity to go and say, okay, let me go and seek medical attention.
Absolutely.
I fully agree with you. And it's if you go and extrapolate this in life, there's so many situations where I think luck is a big aspect in terms of getting over the hill, so to speak.
Yeah.
And who you're around with at times, and and all that, it makes a difference. It really makes a difference.
Right. So moving on, the one of the reasons why I really wanted to get you on the podcast was, your experience running, ultra marathons. That's something that I've, for me, that's something really admirable, because it really pushes the human limits. But before we get into the ultra marathon part, I'd be interested, like, how did you even, because you said you were sporty, you played all sorts of different types of sports. How did you get into marathon running, and what was that spark that got you involved in it?
Yeah. So one thing I really love doing, and I think it's probably it goes back to being in Kenya, was climbing. And Nairobi is it's a very high altitude. And so I was kind of blessed in some ways that, having grown up in that country, in that city, my lungs were more adaptable to altitude. And
Right.
so at a young age, I think I was probably 9 or 10, I climbed Mount Kenya, which is about 4,800 meters,
Oh.
unsupported, or right to the top. And then I ended up doing that like a couple of times a year. I've done Mount Kilimanjaro, I think, five times, and that's about 6,000 meters. But I've also done that pretty aggressively up, like trying to get up there in 2 days and running down, just me and a guide. So I'm kind of, because I'm used to the elevation. A lot of people struggle, especially if you're growing up in Singapore. It's like very hard to get higher than that, because your body's not used to it. Yeah.
Right.
So I was lucky in that sense, and I did that when I was probably in my teens, and I used to be obviously a Boy Scout, and then I joined something called the Outward Bound Mountaineering School. My parents were like, I think it was a winter holiday, and they were like, this guy's going to hang around the house, and I was known for breaking windows and creating a mess. Let's put him into So he put me for this 3 week stay into, it was actually the foot of Mount Kilimanjaro, a city called Loitoktok, where I ended up basically mountaineering school, and I learned a lot about the physical endurance stuff, living out for 48 hours with no food and making your tents. So I ended up, I loved that aspect, because I kind of got used to the outdoors and the roughing it and the climbing and all that. But I was still young. I was overweight. And I was not a skinny young kid. I was pretty chubby, and I was not, just not the guy that, you won't say this guy is this physical guy. So it was not that
Right.
kind of guy, but I enjoyed the stuff. And then I think what happened is I went up to university, and one of the things I took on after that was I then decided to climb a bit more. So I did Camp 2, Everest Camp 2, which is about 7,200 meters. It's pretty high up, so it's far up above base camp. I did that in 2001 with a bunch of colleagues from the US, so one of my schools I studied at. So we kind of did that. It was really nice. It was pretty enduring. I was there for about a month. I went to Nepal and then Lukla and all the way up. It was a great experience. And then I've done Mont Blanc as well. So the Mont Blanc, then I've done a lot of mountains in the Tatra Mountains in Central Eastern Europe. I've done Kota Kinabalu, all that. So I kind of was very much into the mountain sport kind of thing. But that's
Can I just check? Is Mont Blanc in the French Alps?
French Alps, yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, we got into, this is the summertime. We done it twice. The first time was in the summer, summer of 2003, when there was rock stopped falling. A lot of people died that summer. We were very lucky. And then I did it a couple of years ago with my daughter and I. My daughter is very athletic. So she and I decided to do it. And it was in 2015. And she really pushes me. She's been quite a instrumental person to me as well, because we did Kilimanjaro together. I'm always behind her and I'm struggling, and she's like, "Dad, come on, you can do that." She's younger than me. So I'm like, "Yeah, I'm going to catch up with her." So she and I did Mont Blanc with Kilimanjaro. So she kept me on my toes. We did Kota Kinabalu together. Funny, at Kota Kinabalu, when I did it, when I was coming down, I really was paining. I don't know why I was hurting. She's like, "Dad, you're such a softie. Come on, keep up with me." Yeah. Anyway, so I did all that mountaineering stuff. What I learned from that is I love the organizational bits, because you have to organize, your gear, your equipment, your food, all that stuff. You got to plan the route. You got to figure out the guide. Sometimes when I was climbing mountains in Kenya, or even Tanzania, Kilimanjaro, the guides aren't very good. They pretend they're guides, but they're not guides. So I've been lost on mountains because the guides get lost. So all that aspects of preparing yourself, so you're not relying too much on somebody else. I kind of got used to that in some ways. And then I think the other thing I enjoyed was I like pain for some reason. I know it sounds a bit crude, but these moments where I'm like hurting and I've got this weight on my shoulder and all that. I kind of like that. I won't say I like it, but I kind of enjoy it quite a lot. So there's been instances like I remember there was one time when you're getting to the top of a peak. You always find when you're in that whole 5,000 meter range, a lot of people that are strong to that level, they start slowing down. And then I have this ability to just carry on, and I end up crossing them, and I just keep going and going and going. So my body takes that pain in a very different way. And so all this was in me, and it's not something that you kind of learn, but it's something that's, I guess it's DNA, or it's where you've grown up, etc. So that was one part of the background. Then I think I would say that when the past 10 years, I was like on and off, going to the gym, doing small runs here and there, not a lot of climbing since I came to Asia. And I wanted to get and do something different. And I think I mentioned this connection coming back to education was always in the back of my mind. Now, I think you asked the right question at the start about the things I read as well and things that I listen to. When I listen to all these things and read, that it forms kind of sense to you. So you want to give back. You want to try and endure. I like the physical endurance part. I'm like, what can we do? What can we do? So I think this whole thing with the running just happened. I remember it was not something that I thought about, but I just really went to the internet site and I said, where can I do a run? It was really a Google search. and really, this thing there was a race in New Zealand that popped up from this company called Racing the Planet. It's an ultramarathon, but it said on the thing, it's a foot race. So in my naivety, a foot race means I can walk it. So it says 250K foot race. I've never been to New Zealand. I love adventure. There's a bit of mountains because I love mountains. Mountains, New Zealand, foot race. I go to pack my bag, carry my stuff. Hey, this all tick the box kind of stuff. So I just signed up. And once you pay the deposit, you're pregnant. You pay that money and you're like, okay. So I did that. And then I started researching this thing. And I said, oh my God, it's a foot race doesn't mean foot race. It means you're on your feet, but you got to run. Yeah, you can walk, but then you've got cutoff times. So I said, oh my God, what have I done? And then I realized that when you're climbing a mountain, when you're carrying the weight, you're going much slower because you're going up the hill. But you're running. So when you're carrying the weight and you're running, it's completely different tactic. So the whole game plan changed. And then I think something kicked in me saying, hey, Mr. Nanji, you've got to wake up now. So I got that backpack. I remember it was Christmas 2018. I was in the UK at my sister's house. It was like, I think, 20th of December. I bought some stuff from the store. And it was really, the UK, the weather is terrible. It was rain, cold, miserable,
Right.
Christmassy like thing. And everybody was getting ready for Christmas. So I would leave the house early in the morning and run around her block with this bag on mine in the rain, trying to get used to the way. It was miserable, And I was like, God, why am I doing this? But I think I kind of got used to it in some ways. And then it just triggered. And before I knew it, I was in New Zealand. And so I think that's how there was no method to it. It was just like, it just went. But I think the fact that I like the endurance, I like the pain, I enjoy the planning, the entrepreneurial side of planning, and the logistic part, it all just came together.
Yeah.
So it was one of these things.
Right. That's interesting. And I'm curious because you spoke a little bit about training in the streets of UK with that backpack in the rain. What is it like to prepare for a 250-kilometer run, I guess?
Yeah. So it's a lot involved, So one of the tricks is the weight, because most of these races they will tell you what you have to carry mandatory. So in this race, those 36 items are mandatory. So obviously your rucksack, your shoes, or stuff, but they have things like a whistle. They have things like a bag to put in. They call it a DV bag to have in case it gets really cold, you get warm, you put this on. A torch light, all those little things. But then they have minimum food as well. So you get 14,000 calories. So you can get any mix of stuff you want. So there's this 36 items, and then you carry stuff that you like as well. Now, the thing is, we all have our luxuries. I would love to have a nice cappuccino in the morning. I'd love to have a nice, olives in the evening or, whatever.
Right.
But the more you carry, the more heavy it is. So you then end up getting into this whole planning exercise. You say, okay, what should I carry that I think is essential? And then it's amazing how much stuff is out there because you can buy stuff that weighs much less than the usual stuff, but you pay more for it. So you've got to figure out what it is. So and then you've got to get used to your shoes and the different types of shoes you're going to run with. Because this is not just a marathon because you're running over days and also you're running in different terrain. So it's not your typical night shoes you buy off the shelf. You've got to buy the right shoes. Then you got the right socks because blisters. So what socks work with you? Then you got to have the right blister taping. Then you have to have the right sort of clothes for the warm cold weather, the sleeping bag. So you kind of start building all this stuff in. So it all becomes part of the plan. But then you got to get used to it because just buying it and going to the race ain't going to work. So you got to try and train with it. So for the 2 months before the New Zealand race, I started getting used to the gear. And I won't forget one instance where I bought this pair of shoes. I loved them. And I was running in Singapore with them. But by the time I got to the race, I'd done probably about 200, 300 kilometers with them. And the shoes at the bottom had worn off. And a week before the race, I was like, oh my God, my shoes are worn off. I need new shoes. The trouble is, you just buy new shoes and you put them on, you get blisters. So I remember going to in Singapore. I went to, I think, the Lost City. There's a running shop there. There was not the same pair of shoes was not there. And I love these shoes. But there was a model that was better, the model above it. So I bought the model above it, but I hadn't worn them. So I ended up walking on Orchard Street trying to break into my shoes. These little things, and then you think you've forgotten something, but then I think the preparation is quite important, and then you Google a lot. The other big part is nutrition. It's a very big part of it, and I didn't know about nutrition. For me, I do all these mountain climbs and all that. Yeah, I'll have a little, sweet here and there, or a chocolate bar, or whatever. But running, it's not like that because you can't carry chocolate bars; they're heavy. Every time you do a run, you've got to plan what you eat when, during the run, before the run, after the run. So it's a lot of planning. So my wife was, I'd say, my coach. She really, really came to bear, and she basically did research around, what you should have before you run. So we tried different nutrition. What do you do during the run? So every 10K, I'd have something. Every 15K, 20K, 30K. And there's one day it's 80 kilometers. So 80-kilometer run, what do you do when? So she really so we tried different things. So when I was training in Singapore, I would try different things. Sometimes they don't go with your stomach, sometimes they do. Then when I finish my run, I do a recovery drink, which is very important. What's the right recovery? So you're kind of balancing carbohydrates, you're balancing protein, you're balancing all the ions you've lost, the electrolytes. So all that comes in. And then we created a spreadsheet that had everything, all my equipment and the weight, and then I used to weigh them, and then I would try and see, is there something lighter or better? So I was mixing foods. So, you have to carry food, and it's right food. What's the right food for you? What's the right cereal for you? It's all that. So we had a spreadsheet, and we're working on the spreadsheet. It's very, very meticulous planning. And then in the end, I got the formula right. And then I was off to New Zealand. When I go to New Zealand, I see all these professional guys, and oh my God, I thought I had done, because these guys do really well. They're all pros, yeah. So my backpack was about 9.5 kilos. The lightest backpack was 7 kilos.
Wow.
And the heaviest backpack was 17 kilos. So I was like, oh my God, what's going on here? And then you see the way people have their gear, and then, the way they prepare. And, this is very different. So I learned a lot from that. So I think the planning was good what I did, but I was probably 50% of there. And after my first race, I picked up a lot of good tips. And I must say that without that, I think my wife's support in that whole process, I probably wouldn't have got as far as I did.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I'm in awe because, that preparation sounds so meticulous. And the fact that you said it's only 50% of the preparation, as some of those, professionals, if I may call them that, prepare for. I suppose the pre-marathon phase itself is quite a significant portion. So, as a new runner, even with your wife's support, who I must say is fantastic to do it all this with you, she must probably have been worried because you were going in. But I'm curious, because this was your first race, what was the mental preparation you had to do? Because as a fresh ultra marathoner, this must have been, I don't know. Maybe you can talk us through it.
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think, and people forget about the mental part. You get very nervous. Because I'd sleep at night. And I had to get up. One thing about the racing is you've got to have a routine, and you've got to follow a routine. So okay, I've got to wake up every morning, and I've got to go run. And, I'd sleep at night, and getting good sleep and rest is important. So I get to bed a bit early. And in Singapore, as you know, it gets very hot. So I try and get out very early, And normally I get up at 4:30 to get out by 5. And I'd carry a 10 kg backpack with me, which had all my drinks, all my stuff that I'd carry on the rail race. So I'd simulate the rail race in Singapore during my running year. And I try and do, in the week, I was trying to do my runs. So there was the weekdays because I travel a fair bit. So when I'm in Singapore, I try and do the runs in Singapore. When some weekends I do the long runs, but getting up at 4:30 every time you're in Singapore is not fun because it's dark outside. You're carrying this backpack. You leave your house. You're running on the streets. You look like a lunatic with carrying this backpack running around. But my wife would kick me and say, "Get up, get it done." So I remember that alarm would go, and it's typically like the snooze button. She would kick me, "Get up." So so she really kind of got me out of that, which is great. And then I'd get up, and you're nervous. Because, when you start running, you get out there, the first few kilometers, it's not fun because your breathing has to get into a cycle, your body is hurting, you're worried, you're thinking about the bed, you all the sounds in your mind saying, "Stop, come on, don't worry, do it tomorrow." And you'd be amazed, you just get exhausted just with the thinking. So I used to get up a bit early and I started meditating. And I downloaded this app. It's called Calm.
Right.
And now there are other better ones, I'm sure. And I just take the 10-minute meditation slots and I just sit in my room and just get myself together. And I found it very, very useful. And one of my nieces also told me about some other things on YouTube, which is about gratitude. And so I do a lot of gratitude meditation. And I felt it really brought me to myself and my senses and all that. I also didn't look at my emails from work. I try to avoid it in the mornings. Because once you start thinking of that stuff, your boss wants this, you got to get this email out, you just kind of, your mind just gets thrown away. So I had to change my routine in the mornings, and then I'd get out there. And then when I was in this process of running, you got to try and breathe in a certain way and get your mind, your body in this whole sense of rhythm. And so the spiritual aspects are very, very important. So I think some people ask, what do you think about when you're doing some long runs? And I think when you get into melody, and I use the word melody because I think it's really the right thing. Your melody is between the pain in your body, then the endurance part, and then the thinking part and the soul part, and you get in this rhythm. And when you're in this rhythm, it just goes on and on. So when I do really long runs, like 50, 70K runs, it's not so much about speed. As long as you know you're going the right pace, you're not going to be left behind. And I knew when I was doing New Zealand, I told myself, I took poles with me, walking poles, because I knew if I can't run it, I'll just walk it quickly using my poles. Or if I get hurt, I'll use my poles. And I kind of decided in my mind that it's not about winning a race. It's about finishing the race. And you've got to realize that as long as you don't hurt your body, in terms of the pain and all that. But then I think it's all about this rhythm you get into. And when you're doing a long race and you just keep that pace. So when I was doing, for example, both New Zealand and the Atacama Desert, I realized when I cross a very, like the 50K mark, etc., my body gets into a certain routine. It takes a long time, obviously, but by the time you get there, you run a couple of hours. But when you get in the routine, it's an amazing space because the pain is very different pain. You've crossed the pain boundary. You're in a different landscape altogether. Your mind opens up and you just continue the space. And so then I get into this routine. And then when you're in this routine, it's like being in a meditational space, and you just keep going and going and going. And, you'll be amazed how you just end up, getting not better, but getting closer to the finish line. And a lot of people get stuck at that point. So crossing that mental boundary is really critical. Now, it doesn't happen always, because sometimes something nags you down completely, or you're not comfortable with your gear, or you just didn't eat the right thing, or somebody told you something that just bugs you, or you remember an episode in your life that really takes you somewhere else and you kind of lose that space. It does happen. So as long as that doesn't happen, you get in the zone, it really is good. So I really think the spiritual aspect is very, very important, extremely important. The other thing I would say is you've got to know the breaks in life. And when you get in the spiritual aspect, in the physical aspect, in the mental aspects, you get to points when you're in a race where you will see the point and you will realize this is a point you can make it faster. And you've got to take those breaks. And so some people use the counting technique. They're on a hill, the hill is really steep, and they know they can't run very fast up a hill, but they keep moving, but they count backwards from 100. And then they count back again, So the mind goes into kind of a rhythm. So I learned that trick as well. How do you count back? You come back to 0, and you count back again. So your mind is focused on the numbers and not on the body and the pain and all that. So so you learn these kind of techniques. So as soon as you're over the hill, you're like, wow, and then you just sprint. So you kind of get into the zone. So I think it's all about understanding your body, your mind, what really keeps you ticking. And it's lovely, when you get to that. And the other thing is about pain. I mean, this morning it was raining in Singapore, so I went out for a run. I loved it. And people were like, why are you running in the rain? But to me, the rain was, I looked at it like, oh, beautiful weather. I don't get rain. It's cool. It's nice. So you change a negative to a positive, and it makes you feel a lot better in that space. Otherwise, if it's raining, it's cold, I'd never go out. But I had to convert that to something that I made myself appreciate and love the rain, and then you want to do it more. So those are little things that come in with practice.
Yeah,
so it's a long answer.
No, it's wonderful. Yeah, because I really didn't want to interrupt you because there was a lot of useful topics there, and I wanna focus on one in particular because you talk about getting into that rhythm, and once you're in that rhythm, you're really in that flow, and you're really in the zone of accomplishing your goal and finishing your goal. Does that mean that concentration requires a bit of time to achieve, or is it like straight from the start you concentrate and try to get into that flow?
It's a great question. It's a great question. So I debate this a lot. Every time I run, I debate with this. So it's really, really pointed question. I think it depends on the person. That's my feeling. I could be wrong about this. And so I can talk about myself. So when I start, like I gave you this morning's episode, it was not a long one, it was just a 10K run, for example. But every time I start running, I don't feel comfortable. Like, oh my God, because I don't normally, when I'm running, I don't normally stretch or I just get on and do it. So the first few things like, oh God, here I am again. Oh my God, same old thing. My mind is like, oh, boring. Oh, I've seen that. You kind of, so I call it the flushing element, and so I'm going to flush it out. But if I was in a different country or a different place, which is all exciting and new, then maybe that first few kilometers is fun because I'm seeing new things. So the flushing element for me probably takes about thinking about 3 kilometers, maybe five, 3 to 5 is this whole thing. My body's like, oh, come on, get it, what's going on, etc. And then I get to a point where I feel, I feel this rhythm starting to come in. And then I'm in this point where this is getting fun. And I look at the pace, the pace is getting better. And then I'm also used to the thing I'm drinking. So if it's going to be a longish kind of run and I'm used to the drinking, then I kind of feel quite comfortable. And I see it getting better and better. Then you hit this zone between, let's say, the 15K zone to the 25K zone. And that can be quite a painful zone. Because for me, what I find that zone is like, should I go back home? Should I stop? What do I do? Etc. But if I get the right kick, it could come from nutrition, or it could come from a certain thought in my mind. In Singapore, I love listening to music, or I listen to podcasts. If the podcast, whatever, is the right tone, the right thing, the right beat, and the right music, I'm like, yeah, let's go with it. I cross that zone. But if I don't cross that zone, that 10K and 15, 25 can be pretty long. So I'm like drudging. So what I do is I lower my pace because I don't want to pace it too much and get too because your mind takes a lot of energy. You don't realize this. But I then lower the pace and just but if I'm okay in the right mood, I get over that. And then the 25 to 35K zone, I love that zone because I call it the pain zone. This is when your body really feels you hurt. Your legs, your thighs, your knees, oh God, it's painful. And the heat, because in Singapore, the heat's getting to you, etc. So I then try and have a lot of liquids to try and just get my system into that space. That's I'd say the 35 zone. When I hit the 35 zone, it's like, hey, if I'm doing a 50K, I'm there now, but 15K to go, hey, why not? So that's the kind of flip that takes place. Now, I think some other runners are right from the way go. They're like in that zone. They know their pace is, let's say, 4 minutes a kilometer. They are out there, and they just keep going. They're hitting their feet and just spacing away. But I find those tend to be pretty much people doing a marathon or half a marathon or 10K, etc. If you do longer runs, you need to break it off in many ways. Now, imagine the same run carrying a backpack with you, 8 to 10 kg backpack. It's a very different experience. So when I got weight in my shoulder, sometimes I love it because it brings my pace down so down and my breathing is much better because my heart rate isn't going up. And so when I bring my pace down in terms of running with a backpack, what I told you in terms of timings will change. I'll feel a lot stronger when I hit like 50, 60K. So it kind of delays the impact. But this is an interesting question because it just depends on that individual. And therefore I tell people, like my daughter or friends say, oh, we're going to start running. I said, hey, don't try and keep up with other people. Or if you don't need to run with other people, just do it yourself. Because everybody has their own game, their own rhythm, and you will find that, after a couple of times, you might do 1K, then 2K or 3K. You might go back to 1K, you might hate it, but it's okay. It's part of the experimentation that goes on. And then sometimes don't just go up and down the hill. Just run up the hill, run down, run up and run down. But you're building this rhythm in your body that's getting used to it. So I think it's kind of, so I love to see people running. When I see people running and say, well, great, super, it's so nice because, everyone's got their own thing. And it's not for competition, as long as you take the competition out. The other thing is goals. Every time I go out, if I say I want to do a 20K, it's not the right thing. Because what happens when you have a goal, you end up, oh, am I there? Am I going to get there? You're like, oh, your mind is just focused on getting there. And then you get tired. So I tend to try and keep it a bit wide. Say, I'll do maybe, 10 to 15K or 20 to 30K, whatever it is. Or 1 to 5K, whatever. Just to keep that thing broad enough so you're not sort of getting mentally exhausted. Because trust me, if you have a very aggressive goal, the likelihood you leave the house will be less. Oh no, I don't feel like doing it. But just go out there. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's kind of the learning that I picked up. Yeah.
Wow, I'm going to remember that. So don't put yourself under unnecessary mental stress. If it's already going to take up a lot of your mind and physical space.
Agree.
Yeah, that's a great one. I'm going to write that down for sure. The other question I have, I suppose, is I mean, when you run 250 kilometers, I'm sure at some point there'll be blisters, you'll be cramped up, you'll be exhausted. I mean, these are the times where, especially when you have, when you're used to, especially when you're training in Singapore, to just say, maybe I can just go home. But like how do you think about this particular challenging situation, and how do you pull yourself out of it to go the distance and to finish the race?
Yeah. So it's all about planning and preparation. So I would say, so when I was doing the runs in Singapore initially, so it was January 2018 in February for the race. The first few times, lots of blisters. They're really painful. Because I didn't know about blister taping. I didn't know you can put stuff before you run on your feet and wherever you get blisters. You're carrying a backpack, so the blisters also come on your shoulders, on your back. But you get lovely robes you can put on to blister prevention. Again, the types of socks you buy. There are socks that you can buy that are 100% blister. They give you money back if you get blisters.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So so you get used to this kind of stuff, but then sometimes you get into water and all that stuff, and so the water goes in your shoes, and then it obviously opens up a lot more pain and blisters or whatever. But I think so you've got to start getting used to your body, and you've got to treat your body like a bit like a goddess, and I truly mean that. So like for example, today is well 2 days 2 days ago I did a very long run in Singapore. So I was out, pretty much for a couple of hours. But the night before, I made sure I looked up my body. My body was fine, massaged it. The morning I started to run, I made sure I was, feeling good, appreciating my body, nurturing it. When I did the run, when I came back, again, stretching, looking after your body, taking out the pain, scrubbing yourself, putting the right ointment, all that stuff. So you've got to treat I'm talking about the outer body, very much like a little goddess, and I think it's important. So when you get those blisters, they will happen, treat them well, but you don't give up. Because when you give up, they'll come back again. So you've got to harden your body, and you'll notice that a lot of the good runners don't get blisters or hardly get blisters. So you'll find over time that your body will get to a point. It's a bit like, if you like playing instruments, or you love your cars and you polish your car and you make sure it shines perfectly well, it's a bit like that. So that's one part of it. When you're on the run, there are times you get cramps, or you could have tendon issues, and you could have many things. So obviously the stretching is quite important before and after, definitely. But when you're in the run, that can happen. And I think different people take pain in different ways, and I've seen this at times. There's times when I'm running, I'm like, oh my god, I can't, just cramped or something. It depends on your tolerance level. My advice is that everybody knows the limits of their body, but unfortunately, we tend to be a bit more conservative. When the pain hits, it's, oh God, I can't carry it. And I think we can carry it. But sometimes you can get over the bump and you're fine. So sometimes you need to just do a bit more, and if the pain becomes much, much more, then you kind of get to a point. But if you give up too soon, your body knows, your body's got a mind. It's going to say, this guy's going to give up anyway, so I'll just do whatever. So you've got to kind of, swing it a bit. But be careful, because sometimes, if you sprain an ankle or something, you can't go on. That's it. You just stop, Now, if you're doing a long run, and it's happened to me in New Zealand. We had one day we were supposed to do 80 Ks. Unfortunately, it rained very hard, and they had to change the route map. We did 92 Ks. So when I got to 80, I thought I'd done, but I wasn't done. The rain was pouring down, so I was wet. I was going through all this bunch of cow dung and all kinds of stuff, or sheep dung. It was really a tough day. When I got back at night, I didn't get to recover a lot. And the next day, I had a message. It's called an IT band issue, where IT band is between your hip and your knee. And when that pulls, it's very hard to recover from immediately. And the next day, we had a sprint for 10 Ks. I was literally limping. There was a lot of pain. But I knew that my body can manage it, so I kind of went through it. So you've got to kind of, I would say, understand those limits. Now, sometimes people give up. But if you give up for stuff that's like blisters or basic, stuff, I won't call it basic, but stuff that you could have fixed, then don't give yourself a green or yellow card. Try and learn from it. But if it's something more critical, then I can understand. But I think when you're in the middle of the race, and when I was in the Atacama Desert, again, we were running in sand, and we were wearing gaiters. And I remember the sand got between my gaiters, and the gaiter was touching my my ankle, really cutting into it. I could feel the pain. And there were people running beside me, and they were going to overtake me. And I was like, I don't want these guys to race me. So if I stop, they're going to race me. And I was debating this in my mind, but I shouldn't have. I should have
Right.
stopped and fixed my foot and then carried on. I didn't do that. So I actually hurt myself a lot more. So sometimes you got to make these trade-offs in a run. But I think everybody should get used to the level of tolerance, and then as you practice more, you will get better. There's no doubt about it. And also as you get older, you got to be more careful and more gentle with your body. So I think keep all that in mind. But I think treating your body as the outer body like a goddess is so important, and the inner body is about nutrition, pre, during, and after.
Right. That's a good thought. I think even for those who are not running in a marathon, it's really something to think about. Um, I'm gonna, and I'm mindful of time, so I want to ask you two questions. One is deeply reflective, and one is very lighthearted to just end things off, so that we can end with a smile on our face. Um, the first one, the reflective one, is really um, a question that I've recently started to ask my interviewers, and that is, what is something that happened in your life that was truly challenging, that turned out to be a positive experience for you that has made you a better person?
Okay. So I will talk about my running. That's okay.
Yeah, that's very apt. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think this whole part about me giving, so I raised money for Kenya for education, and I was able to complete the runs, and I gave money back. That was so, so heartwarming because I connected back to my childhood, my past, and where I benefited. You mentioned that I got the ticket to go out, and I was lucky to have that. I really wanted to give it back, and I'm quite happy I did that. And then I did the next one was in the Atacama Desert in Chile. And I decided to do the run fairly late in the day because I realized I had a window of opportunity from work. And I didn't expect, to do it, but I heard the Atacama Desert was the best run they had because it's really, Chile is a great place. The land, the terrain was great. And everyone in the New Zealand race that had done many of these races kept talking about Chile. You go to Chile. So when I found out it was in August that I could do the race at the end of September, I was like, great, I'm going to do it. So I started training. But the good thing was I already knew what to expect, so I was a bit more mentally prepared. But I trained, and what I found really good is because of this whole discussion we had about the mental part, the physical part, etc. I went to the race very humbly, and I started the race, and I learned a lot about myself through the race because I was a much better person in terms of having gone through the first race, and I went through enduringly. There were some really good runners, and I came out third, which is a great
Wow.
accomplishment for myself. And I was, amongst people that had done this many a time. So I was proud of myself, but more about not just the result, the fact that I'd taken the learnings from the first race and the fact that I become a lot more, my humility has gone higher, I've become a lot more tolerant. This whole sense of giving was important to me. And I was able to carry that to the second race and do even better. And then, come out. So I was 10th in the first, in New Zealand I was 10th. I was now third for somebody who hasn't run. But then I clearly showed an improvement, and I was mentally in a better state, and I was really feeling good. And I must say, all the bits that I planned for, you mentioned my wife helping me out, the stuff I bought, the stuff I meditated with, the stuff I trained with, the whole program worked meticulously. And I was very happy to come out at that point and say, wow, this whole equation feels right. And I changed as an individual. From that race, I've now gone to plant-based. I've been on a plant-based diet, which I've been
Yep.
on for the last 6-7 months. I'm enjoying it. And I'm getting other people to do it. So my whole family is sort of getting more healthier. So I'm appreciating that. So all that has come together in a very nice way. And I think I'm a much better person at work as well, I feel.
Yep.
So
How so?
so I'm in a point where I'm like, I'm happy with life. I'm really happy with life. And I think that's good. And it's come really through this whole accumulation of experiences I've had in the past 12 months.
Lovely. Um, and my final question to you is, who would you like to play you in a movie about you?
Who would you like me to play a movie about me?
Yeah.
You mean me? Oh, sorry, as an
As
actor?
in, yeah. So, which actor would you like to play you in a movie about you?
Wow. 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 Which actor? Okay. I like Harrison Ford.
Right. Good
Uh,
choice.
Yeah, I mean, he would be a great guy because he's got the charisma, he's got the wisdom, he's got the age, probably older than me, but bit of that. I think he would be a good one. Um, the other one that I think would be always been somebody I looked up to when I was young. I guess I'm one of these Top Gun fans. So Tom Cruise has been somebody I've
Yeah.
always admired, and he's probably got a similar height to mine, probably the physique and all that, and probably has much better looks, obviously, and he's a much better himself. But I think something like that. I think from childhood memories coming into where I am now, that'd be nice to
Yeah.
see. I think yeah, between those two, it'll be one of those two, I guess.
That's awesome. Both very timeless actors, so good choices. Um,
Good finishing.
do you have any race that you're coming up that you're raising funds for?
Not at the moment, because
Okay.
I was hoping to do a couple in the first part of this year, but they all got cancelled.
Yeah.
So I'm likely, depending on how things go, there's a race planned in the end of August in Georgia, the country Georgia.
Yeah.
So there's a race there. So if everything goes well, I love to do the race.
Sure.
So the end of August. It all depends on the lockdown situation. My hunch is it probably won't happen
Sure.
because by the time you get on a plane, so it might be towards the end of the year. And I think so I'll have to see. And also I want to try and see whether I change a few things in the next race. I've never. One of the funny things you mentioned is I always try to run the race. I've never tried to fast walk a race. So I'm
Right.
thinking you should try something very different. I'm also thinking a bit of myself around maybe trying to try a different sport as well. So I might decide to dabble into something. Yeah. So only I do will obviously be I'll try and link it back to charity and back to Africa.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. Yeah. And when that happens, do let me know. I'll put the description in our podcast details for listeners to donate to some great causes. And
Great.
yeah, hopefully you can raise the amounts that you're looking for.
I really appreciate it. It's very kind of you. It's great. It's great to give back. Really
Yeah.
great.
I agree. Well, thank you, Munir. This has been an absolute pleasure. I learned so much, and I'm sure our listeners would have definitely learned a lot as well. Thank you for taking the time to do this.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me, and I'm really honored and really grateful for the opportunity. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thanks, Munir.
Yeah. Bye.